Okay, quickly, everybody, without thinking. I'm gonna give you a scenario and you gotta respond to it quickly. I'm talking like that. Life or death stakes. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. You're facing off against Monkey D. Luffy. That's right. He's in Gear 4th. He's in Bound Man. He's got hockeyed up. He's ready to go. And he has a King Kong gun aimed right at your freaking face. What do? How do you survive? What do you say to him to get him to stop? Or how do you dodge out of the way or distract him? What do you do to see the next sunrise? Let me know. Here it comes. King Kong gun! Do you survive? Let me know. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I would probably just go with the meat gamble. I'm sure a lot of people probably arrived at that conclusion, right? Like, I've been isekai'd into the One Piece world again, it seems, and I've pissed off the future king of the pirates. Well, I guess I'll just, Luffy, behind you! Meat! And he's like, I'm not falling for that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's a literal Mount Everest made of meat. It's like up in the stratosphere. He's like, I don't know what Mount Everest is, but that sounds like a lot of meat. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll look. And then you just run away. And if that doesn't work, I guess it's just over for you, right? Hey, everybody, how you doing? Tekking and Barry here back again. How would you face off against Barry? Yeah, no, I'm not going to give you a hypothetical there, because honestly, I don't think you have a chance, right? Although, I know enough about Barry to know that he probably wouldn't finish you off with, like, a big final attack like the King Kong gun. No, Barry would probably do something like trap you in some sort of localized, brick hell dimension for a few millennia until he figures out what to do with you. That's probably what Barry would do, yeah. But anyway, today, interesting video premise, we are going to be talking about former generations of the emperors. Not necessarily former generations of the Yonko, because maybe there weren't always 4 emperors every single generation. Maybe there were less, maybe there were more. Where did the whole concept of, like, calling them emperors begin? How long ago did this start? Was it ever since the Void Century? There's always been, like, the emperors on the sea, even before the Void Century, since the invention of piracy in the One Piece world. How does this go? So yeah, this is a question I don't get very often on the channel, but every time I do, I kind of like scratch my chin a bit, like, hey Tekking, who was the Yonko before Shanks? You know, Shanks became a Yonko 6 years ago. Was there an emperor before Shanks, or wasn't there? He just, got really strong, and then there were 4 emperors. How does this work? Or even back before that, like during the time of Roger, or even before that in the time of Zebek, or even before that. So it got me thinking, and I'm like, all right, yeah, this is a pretty, I mean, there's a lot of, theories involved here, and there's just a good chunk of the One Piece, timeline. It's like Void Century, then a bunch of stuff happened we don't understand, and then basically the last few decades of One Piece is all we've really been able to, like, piece together. But I think it's worth a shot to look at. I mean, we jump back further than that every now and then, like with the Nolan backstory, but we don't get to, like, a big scope of the world, but we can talk about it today. And I think this is definitely something that was peaked during chapter 957, when we found out all about the Yonko bounties. Oda made a point to mention in that chapter, not only did he reveal Shanks' bounty, but he also said, Shanks, he's been a Yonko for 6 years, okay? He said that specifically about Shanks. He didn't say that about Big Mom or Kaido, like, this is Big Mom, Charlotte Linlin. She's been a Yonko for 35 years, and this is Kai D.O. He's a duck, but he's also been a Yonko for 25 years. Didn't mention that, but he mentioned that with Shanks. That's interesting, right? And so this was 4 years before the start of the story. He was a Yonko, so at this point, remember, he already was missing an arm. So, I don't know what Shanks did, but he did something to rise through the ranks pretty damn quickly, right? And he's like a relative newcomer to the emperors. So here's a simple question. I've said it before. Was there an emperor before Shanks? And then Shanks killed that emperor and achieved the position? Or was it just like the 3 emperors back then? The Sanko! Sunoco? No, that's a gas station chain. Yeah, Sunoco's definitely a gas station chain. But no, the Sanko, right? And then Shanks just got really famous, or maybe he attacked one of the other Sanko, one of the other 3 emperors, and then, or he did something else, and they just gave him, like, the rank. Not really gave him the rank, because that's not really how it works. It's not like the Warlords. The Warlords, the Shishibukai in One Piece, that is a structured organization that has, like, a chain of command and all that stuff. Like, the world government and the Marines came together, and they're like, okay, we're gonna start accepting, like, legalized pirates, like privateers, coming into the ranks to form a special division in the world government, and we're gonna call them the 7 Warlords of the Sea. And there's a strict thing here where if one of them dies, or is defeated, or is just rendered unfit to be an emperor anymore, not an emperor, a warlord like Moria. Moria was a warlord for a very long time, and then he kept getting his ass kicked in repeated succession, and they're like, okay, we don't want this guy on the payroll anymore. We're going to kick him out and bring on somebody else. That's how the warlords work. And the warlords have to, well, before the system was abolished recently, it had to, maintain equilibrium. So if they lost one of them, they had to bring one in really quickly. That's when Crocodile was defeated. They had the whole meeting and everybody was there, like Sengoku was there and trying to look at possible candidates before they settled on Blackbeard when Lafitte showed up, right? So that's how it is with the Shishibukai, but with the Yonko, it's different, okay? There's no organization structure, all right? You are considered a Yonko for a lot more, like, ambiguous things, like your level of infamy in the world as a pirate, and that might entail a bunch of different things, right? It's not just all about your bounty. Part of it's your bounty, part of it is, I'm sure, your physical strength. If you have a devil fruit, how strong is your devil fruit? How strong is your haki? What about the territories you control? Do you control your own country? Do you have a bunch of territories? Where are they at? Are they in the New World? Are they scattered around the world? How does this work, right? What is the size of your crew? Big Mom has a huge crew, Kaido has a huge crew, but compared to that, Shanks only has like a few dozen men on his ship. Whitebeard had a large crew, but it wasn't nearly as big as like Kaido and Big Mom's massive fleets and their countries that they ruled over, basically, right? So there's a lot of questions regarding this. It's a little bit more ambiguous, but it's basically like you achieve a lot of infamy as a pirate, get a high enough bounty, get recognized by the world government, what you do if you attack other emperors or if you attack the warlords or the marines directly, doing stuff like that eventually gets your name in the paper, and also just sensationalism as well. Like Morgan's is like, big news, Luffy is a fifth emperor, and people are gonna start like, well, yeah, I mean, he does have a high bounty, and he is the son of Dragon. He doesn't own a lot of territory, but he is pretty strong. Maybe he is the emperor. Who knows, right? But the problem is, like, if there was a pirate that was that powerful, that achieved the rank of emperor 6 years ago, and then Shanks killed them, why does no one bring that pirate up anymore? That would be the first question I would have. Like, this ridiculously strong emperor, and then Shanks took the position. How come no one mentions them? But it has been 6 years, and from what we've seen with One Piece, in the One Piece world, there is no internet. There is no, like, pirate Wikipedia where you can look up, like, oh, that was that famous pirate that lived, 6 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, or whatever, right? And it's even mentioned with Rocksteady Zebek. Zebek was this insanely powerful pirate. Like, the way Garp talked about Rox's crew, and from what we've learned about it, like, just from the fan base, we learned that Rox's crew was so damn strong, like, they could have easily, possibly taken over the world. Like, it was in the grasp for them. It wasn't completely off the table, right? Rox was that strong, and yet when Hina brought the name up to Garp, Garp acted like, oh, Hina, you're young. I'm surprised you even know about that, right? So it's kind of like, it kind of fades into the annals of history after a while, where people aren't even like, even if it was like a ridiculously strong pirate that plunged the world into terror, it's like, give it a few decades and people move on. And it makes sense, because look how chaotic the One Piece world is. Look how many ridiculously strong pirates are popping up all the time, right? So after a while, you would just be like, yeah, Rox was really dangerous, but he's gone. He's dead. He hasn't been seen since God Valley 38 years ago. Now we're dealing with Roger, right? And Roger's kind of the exception to that rule because of what Roger did. Roger did something that no other pirate did in the history of pirates. Roger found Laugh-Tale. He found the damn One Piece, right? And then right when he died, he did the whole, like, find my treasure, mateys! Shing! And then everyone was like, great pirate era! So, yeah, everyone talks about Roger to this day because they're kind of living in his shadow. They're still kind of living in this, like, competition he sort of started, right? So, yeah, Roger's the exception to that because he lived such a famous lifestyle. But beyond that, let's say there was a really strong emperor 6 years ago and they rose to power and everything and people were terrified of them. But then, after Shanks killed them and their crew disbanded and, they're dead, they're never coming back, right? It's not like zombies exist in One Piece. No. It's nothing like that. And so after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of Shanks being the new emperor, people just kind of move on and they accept it as like the status quo. Morgan's isn't going to be writing in the paper like, a look back at this emperor that Shanks killed 4 years ago. A look at their life. Morgan's isn't going to do that, right? It's like, he's going to focus on them then and now, like what's going on in the world, right? And there's no like, yeah, Ohara, that was a place. I'm sure there's other places in the world that backlog this history and stuff. But, most people don't have access to that, right? I guess we should think about it. Like, if there was an emperor before Shanks, let's say it was, I'm just looking around my room here. Okay. There was a genius mad scientist, Yonko. before Shanks, right? He was captain of the chemistry pirates, right? And he, walked around with like beakers and stuff, and he created giant mechanical robots to fight for him. And then he was really strong. He had a bounty of like, 2.9 billion. And then Shanks showed up one day and laid waste to his robotic army. And then took his head, and then became the next emperor, and that's the story. The great Emperor Senko. Senko, yes, but Senko's dead. Nobody talks about Senko anymore because he's been around, but it's moving on to the next generation, right? All right, so regardless of that, though, I like to personally think there wasn't a pirate back then. I like to think there were maybe just the three emperors, and then Shanks achieved the title. But what if you go back even further? Okay, that's the question. What if you go back to the time of Roger? Okay, so at the time of Roger, would Roger, it was never really stated that Roger was a Yonko of his time or an emperor of his time, but he most assuredly would have been. Before Roger was known as the king of the pirates, the man that reached the One Piece, or reached the end of the Grand Line even, like when he was still journeying, because Roger had his adventures for decades until his final journey to Laugh Tale. Before he was king, I'm sure they would have considered him an emperor. When we see him in the Odin flashback, when we see Roger and Whitebeard clash on that island with a tremendous burst of hockey, rippling the sky itself, at that point, I think it's fair to say Whitebeard was considered one of the emperors, and I think Roger was also considered one of the emperors at that time. There's even a parallel to that maybe a little bit later on, or actually this was a little bit before this in the manga. We see Kaido and Big Mom clash at Wano, and it's kind of the same deal when Kaido and Big Mom fight, and it was just recently shown in the anime, and it was like crazy powerful. You see the clouds begin to ripple and split apart. It's like every time in the story when you see two emperors clash, or two characters of a high enough level, you see that rankling in the sky. Also happened when Shanks clashed with Whitebeard on his ship, right? So that's like a thing, right? So yeah, obviously before he was considered king of the pirates, I think Roger would have been considered one of the emperors of his time. Whitebeard would have still been an emperor, and Big Mom would have still been an emperor. What about Kaido, though? What about Kaido? Because he's a little bit younger than Big Mom and Whitebeard are, because he was an apprentice pirate on Rox's crew. Although, there is something, as a caveat, I want to bring up to that, and it involves the whole, what if Kaido turns out to be a legitimate dragon? Not a demon that ate the dragon fruit, not a dragon that ate the human fruit, but whatever the hell. What if it turns out that he is just a dragon with no devil fruit power, and he's a dragon, and he was born a dragon, and he can just transform, because dragons maybe just have the inherent ability to transform into, human guises. Maybe it's something like that. If that's the case, maybe ages work a little bit different for a dragon species. And the only reason I bring that up is because I was looking through a lot of these, characters today, to get their ages and everything like that. Whitebeard, he was 72 when he died. Big Mom is right now, she's 68. Shanks is 39. Blackbeard is 40. We know ages for all the Yonko except for Kaido. Now, you might say that's just because Oda's never revealed it. Maybe he will reveal it in an SBS, whatever. Or you could look at it as kind of auspicious, a little bit odd that Oda has revealed the ages of all the other Yonko except for Kaido. Almost like if Oda revealed Kaido's actual age, people might be like, what? And that might give a clue to what he really is, and maybe Oda doesn't want to drop that clue yet. If the dragon race ages, if he's centuries old, it's oh yeah, Kaido's age, he's actually 350 years old. You might be like, excuse me, Oda? What? So I think he might be waiting for that. We find that out. Oh yeah, turns out Kaido's a legitimate dragon and he's been alive for 3 centuries, right? Which, in terms of dragon age, might only be in your mid-50s, and compared to a human. But that's centuries for dragons from a human perspective, right? Might be something like that. But let's just say if Kaido was an apprentice on Rox's crew, probably the same age as Marco was when he was an apprentice on Whitebeard's crew, so maybe 15, 16 years old, same same with Buggy and Shanks and everything like that, right? So was Kaido a member of the Emperors back during like when Roger and Big Mom and Whitebeard were all doing their things, or did it take a little while for Kaido to achieve that rank properly, right? Until he properly took over all of Wano, and then the alliance with Orochi, that was when he was considered one of the Emperors, right? And before that, there were only 3. It really does feel like maybe this might just be because of the way that the society in One Piece functions. It's like maybe the society got it in their heads like Yonko, 4 emperors. That just has like a really nice ring to it. So there's like, there has to be 4. So if one of them dies, it's like, okay, there's only 3 emperors now, or another one dies, there's only 2 emperors now. That doesn't sound right. There's gotta be 4. So maybe if like there's even someone that's not necessarily deserving of the title of emperor, the civilians of One Piece might consider them an emperor just for the sake of getting up to like, it's like, well, there has to be 4. So, like we'll throw this person in the midst. It might be something like that. It depends on how many people consider it factually true that that person is an emperor. It just really comes down to how many people consider that person an emperor. I think that's a big piece of criteria there. So let's go back even further than that, even further back than like 30 years ago. 38 years ago is when God Valley happened. Okay, that's when apparently Roxy Zebek died under the waves, when Roger and Garp went at him. That's when Garp got the title of, Garp the hero and everything like that. At this point in time, 38 years ago, Big Mom was 30, Whitebeard was 36, Kaido, like I said, we don't know, but let's say maybe somewhere between 15, 16 years old in his teenage years. Shanks was 1, so I don't think Shanks was a really big player in the whole pirate game at this point. I also threw in like Shiki. I like to think, we don't have an official age for Shiki either, but I like to think Shiki is probably in his 60s right now, relatively maybe the same age as like Big Mom, if a little younger, maybe a little bit older, roughly around like late 60s, early 70s for Shiki. So back then he'd probably be in his like mid 30s too. As for Captain John, Wang Zhi, Silver Axe, everybody, we just don't know what their ages would be. But this got me thinking. Let's say the term Emperor of the Sea, or Yonko, or whatever you want to say, Sanko, whatever. Back then, it really didn't exist. There were pirates, and they were really strong pirates, sure. But like the term Emperor just, it didn't catch on. It wasn't what they were called yet. They would just be like, oh no, that's a really strong pirate. That's all they would say, right? But then, because a lot of pirates back then were probably just doing, maybe they weren't trying to amass a lot of territory. Maybe they didn't have a lot of ambition. Maybe it was literally just be a pirate, pillage villages, grab the booty, grab the gold doubloons, matey, and all that stuff. And that's all they really did. There was really no ambition, right? The reason everything's kind of set up the way it is right now is because a lot of pirates have that final goal that Roger set on the scaffold right before he died, like, find my treasure, find the One Piece, become king of the pirates, right? So a lot of pirates have that goal now, and that's what kick-started that great age of piracy. But that didn't exist before Roger, but Rox existed, and what Rox tried to do was become king of the world, king of the entire world. So maybe, if you think about it that way, it'd be further back than 38 years ago, because 38 years ago is when Rox finally died, or purportedly he died. He disappeared. Last time anyone's heard of him was 38 years ago at God Valley. He probably started this whole thing, though, way further back than that. Maybe like 50 years ago, or around there, back when Big Mom and Whitebeard were like, teenagers themselves, right? And so they were apprentices on Rox's crew, and then like give it a decade or so, and then they grew up and they're just as powerful, or they get stronger, all that stuff. Okay, so Rox had this ambition. I'm going to be king of the world. He amassed all these really strong pirates. Maybe Rox was the first pirate that the world at large referred to as an emperor, because that's kind of what he wanted to be, an emperor or a king or a ruler, right? So then maybe his title was like Rox the Emperor or Emperor Zebek or something like that. Like that was his pirate epithet or whatever, okay? And then he died, or he disappeared at God Valley, and the remaining members of his crew all split up. Big Mom, Kaido, Whitebeard, Shiki, Wang Zhi, everybody like that. I can't keep doing that. It's rough on my throat. But, they all broke up, and the world at large started calling them the emperors, right? Out of like, oh, they used to be on Rox's crew. Rox was like this emperor. He's gone now. So the remaining members of his crew are just as strong, or, you know, maybe close to being as strong as Rox was. And so we're going to give them the title of emperor. And maybe that was the first batch right there. It was like maybe Whitebeard and Big Mom at first, maybe Shiki, Captain John, Silver Axe, everybody. Those were the emperors. Okay, maybe there were 5 or 6. Maybe all those names we heard dropped. You know, I'm not going to go through the whole list again, but all those names we heard that were on Rox's crew, all the heavy hitters, after God Valley, they were all considered emperors, if provided none of them died. I mean, who knows? Maybe Silver Axe died at some point. Like, all right, he's gone. But, you know, during God Valley. But all the ones that were still alive, Shiki and everybody, they were considered emperors. Okay, and then maybe some of them faded away, like nobody's heard of Shiki ever since he broke out of Impel Down like 20 years ago, so, you know, he's no longer considered one of the emperors because no one knows where he's at. Captain John died, we know for a fact Captain John died, and then Whitebeard and Big Mom and Kaido, they kept around, and so that's why the status is there. And maybe it's just one of those things where just over the years, over the decades, people forget the origin, they forget of why they were originally called them emperors or where the term even came from. They just started calling them emperors because maybe once again it just sounds cool, like, oh yeah, the 4 emperors, that's Shanks, that's Big Mom, Kaido, and Blackbeard right now, right? Yeah, that's how it works. It used to be Whitebeard before him, but he died. So it might have been something like that, and it just changes, and that's how it arrived at. But Rox might have been the progenitor of all this. He's the one that kind of took this chaotic mess of pirates and gave them a goal to follow, like not just pillaging, not just running from the Marines. We're going to become king of the world under my flag. You know, that's how it's going to go. And then Roger kind of like maybe made it more into a competition, not king of the world, which is a little bit like, all right, how do you become king of the world? But Roger set it up like a finish line. Like, no, you get to the final island, you get to Laughtail, you find my treasure, you become king. That's the rule. That's how it goes, right? And so that's the case there. I'm sure there were ridiculously strong pirates before Rox's time, hundreds of years ago. Who was the big pirate during Ryuma's time, 400 years ago? I'm sure piracy still existed back then. So who was the big name 400 years ago? And more importantly, who was the big name 800-something years ago during the time of the Void Century? Back when Toki was born, who was the pirate that was ravaging the world? Joy Boy? Might have been Joy Boy. Was Joy Boy even a pirate? Maybe so, or maybe a different kind of pirate back then, because it's like maybe the whole origin of pirates, as we find out in One Piece. You know, maybe, hell, who knows? Maybe we'll find out by the end of this story that the whole origin of piracy started with Joy Boy. I know you could say, like, there's like in our world, it's kind of hard to pin down, like, who was the first pirate. You know, because it's more of just like, it's basically like saying, like, who was the first criminal that figured out how to use a boat? You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to pin down exactly who was the first person to do this, right? I don't know about that. I actually haven't looked it up, but I think it would be fairly difficult to pin down, like, you might be able to pin down, like, the first pirate that was given a bounty or recognized by a government. Well, I'm talking about in our world, you know? You might be able to, you know, do that. But, like, who was the first person that figured out, like, I have a boat, I'm gonna take the boat and go out to sea and, like, rob other boats. Yeah, I need a name for this. Tweedledoofers. No, that's a stupid name. Pie. I like Pie. Maybe the first pirate, he really liked pie. He's like, Pie. Pirate. Yeah, pirate. Well, I'm pirate. I will be pirate now. You know? And it's like that. So that's, in our world, it might be hard to figure out, but this is a story. This is a manga. You know, Oda can make it all, like, really, you know, epic and poetic and all that stuff. So he'd be like, okay, the world government was taking over 900 years ago, and then there was this rebellion, that maybe the original revolutionaries that started up, and Joy Boy led that, and Joy Boy fought against the world government, and the world government won. They ruled the world, and then they classified all of the rebellion, everybody that would stand against them, as pirates. And maybe Oda might get the etymology of pirate involved, like where the word actually comes from. And then at that point, it's like, okay, you know, from this day forward, Joy Boy, your descendants, all that raise hell on the seas, that raise this Roger, this Jolly Roger, will be considered pirates. And Joy Boy's like, all right, fine, then we'll be pirates then, whatever. And then that was the origin. And like 900 years later, we have this going on, where there's emperors and warlords and buggies and gaimons and wanos and tokis and time travel, and there's a giant mammoth walking around, and this guy's a freaking pteranodon, and I don't even know what the hell's up with this character. Ah. You think we'll find out? You think we'll find out, like, the big origin of everything? Like, Oda's really gonna go deeper into this than we ever thought he would? Like, this is, like, literally the first, like, the origin of pirates? But maybe, I don't know. But let me know how you feel about this in terms of, like, the Emperor thing and, like, past Emperors and all that kind of stuff there. Because it is a very interesting, like, subject matter. Also, you have characters like Dr. Kureha, who's, like, I put her down there. Not saying Dr. Kureha was a pirate. I mean, who knows? She might have been. But it's, like, 141 years old. Maybe she remembers, like, who was the pirate when she was, like, growing up. You know, when she was in her 20s. Like, when she was Nami's age, who was the big pirate in the world? Because it was before Roger, and it was definitely before Rocks. So how did that go down, right? So maybe we'll find out a little bit more about this stuff in the future. I don't know. But at any rate, thanks for watching, everybody. This is Tekking and Barry signing out. I hope you survived the King Kong gun. Later, everybody.